This is Coda Radio, episode 73 for October 28th, 2013. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode's brought to you by our two fantastic sponsors, GoDaddy.com and Ting.com. I'll tell you more about those sponsors as this show goes on. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week for 73 weeks in a row is our excellent host on the East Coast, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
Good evening, Chris. Wait, what?
Good morning. Well, we're in that weird spot. It's clearly morning where I'm at, but it's at least starting to become afternoon where you're at. Just by a minute, actually. By a minute. So it's all right. How you doing this morning, Mr. Dominic?
I'm good. A little tired.
Yeah. I'm a little tired too, but it's okay. It's all right. It's sort of this show I think will wake us up because we got some hate mail this week. That always wakes you up a little bit.
You know, that's my favorite kind of mail, actually.
Yeah, you bet. Why wouldn't you? Nothing like a best thing in your cup is a little hate mail in the morning. Then we're going to do a little announcement. You know, best part of waking up is hate mail in your cup? No?
It's negative in the freedom dimension.
Sorry, I got that wrong. Then we're going to do... brace yourselves, a little announcement recaps, and then we're going to get into a topic that, honestly, I'm pretty curious where you want to go with this one. You titled it Back to the Backend, and it's going to be like everything from backing up to deployment. So I think that'll be a pretty interesting discussion as well. All kinds of stuff.
Yes, and we will avoid Sir Mix-a-Lot references. Maybe.
No, my backup master is Alan Jude, and all references will be Alan Jude related references. So.
Well, does Alan Jude's a cunt? You know what? Never mind.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Just gonna let that go.
Are we ready for our first email?
Not really, but let's do it.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of what I figured. All right, so our first email this week comes from Danny, and he says, "Hey, Mike, what direction are you going in for server-side technology? Since Mike hates PHP, Node, Rails, and has abandoned .NET and the Play framework because it does not have any good hosting options," which he agrees is true. What are your plans for the server side?
I was unaware that my hatred was so varied and intense.
Get it out of here.
Yes. I guess I say get it out of here when I see things. So right now I'm doing a lot of Java Play. And the whole deployment situation is actually our main topic for today. In terms of hating PHP, that's still true. Don't really hate Rails, right? Just have some concerns.
Right, I wouldn't say you hate Rails. You just mentioned concerns. Yeah, it's fair.
I think it's a little different, if you really.
So, do you want to hold the full answer to that till we get to the back-end segment?
Yeah, I think we should hold it because I don't know that it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, you don't want to spoil it. Spoilers, right? Yeah, okay. Well, that's okay because I feel like Matt's got a question, and by the way, I want to know what's up with this guy's missing T. I mean, that's unusual. It's Matt with one T. Something happened there. He's some kind of rogue. He writes in and he wants to talk about Go language, which I think might...
Everybody.
Yeah, might... Well, I felt like you've been wanting to talk about it too. He says, "Hi, it's Matt with one T again. I wrote in before that I'm just a hobbyist and that I know Python and JavaScript fairly well. I was looking at getting into a compiled and relatively low-level language, and it was suggested that I learn C. But I was looking at Go from Google. I just wondered what your opinions were on Go, other than it's a new language and doesn't have many libraries yet. Basically, would I be doing myself a disservice by learning it over C or C++? Thanks as always. Love all the Jupiter Broadcasting shows. Matt with one T." What do you think of his question there? Is he doing himself a disservice by going with Go?
No, I mean, you're not doing yourself a disservice, right? There's certainly the issue of... it doesn't have the support that an older language might, but everything we're hearing about Go is pretty impressive so far. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that right now.
Okay.
Now, if you're bringing on other people to help you with the project, it might be a little tough to find developers who can quickly ramp up on Go, right? So that might be the Achilles heel for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, but if he's striking off on its own, which is kind of what the impression I got.
What it sounds like, yeah.
Yeah. It seems like if you're gonna roll the dice on a language that's gonna be around in the future, Go's likely one of them. I mean, you never know with Google, you never know for sure, but it's also Go has gone beyond Google in a lot of ways too. So I think it's probably pretty safe. All right, Mike. Well, get your flame retardant pants on because Egon wrote in. First of all, you think his name's really Egon?
If he is, I have a ghost problem he could deal with.
I'm kind of jealous because Egon, that's a good roll of the dice there too. He says, "All right, here it is. Coda Radio is dead for me. How does the endless, repetitive rants about iOS, Android, and the U.S. cell phone situation have anything to do with the art and business of software development? In the last couple of months, a super interesting show turned into a boring waste of time. Still a huge fan of JB though, Egon. You know, it's funny. He quoted our intro, but he forgot the part where we say it's a talk show." So
yeah.
I think where Egon comes from here, and I've thought about this because this is a common complaint, is that's the perspective of somebody who's not developing for mobile, and so that
right.
It's just of no interest to him. Now, people who are developing for mobile, which is more and more people all the time, it's a very real situation for them where these problems are things they really have to take into consideration, and they have to think about. If they're going to invest their small business time and money into something, what's the best play for them, et cetera, et cetera. So for a certain division of our audience, and also for the host of the show, these are very real issues that kind of nobody is fully talking about all out in the open in a frank manner like we are. Most places where this conversation and this dialogue is happening is usually somebody has skin in the game. Either that skin is they're really close to, like, say, Apple, so they don't want to say anything too harsh, or whatever the case might be. There's not a lot of actual fully honest, open dialogues about the problems that developers are facing in this space. And sometimes it is stuff that is ancillary to the actual task of making code.
Right. So I'd also add that, I haven't responded to his email yet, but I guess I'll respond now, but I know he's not listening.
No,
so I did some auditing of the show.
Oh, really? You audited the show?
Yeah, and on the whole, the main topics have actually not been predominantly Apple. Believe it or not, they've been predominantly Google.
Yeah.
Now, if you grade on a curve that is great based on the amount of influence a vendor has in the market, it's actually very much disproportionately favoring Canonical or Linux as a whole.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But if we wanted to say, if we were doing this by market influence, we'd have a lot more .NET talk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've heard the suggestion just make it a straight news show, but there are other straight news shows, right? And, frankly, the news in the dev world is kind of catty, right? The developer A went on,
I've noticed
Twitter and decided to bitch out developer B because he didn't like the way she did her semicolons.
Or blog posts or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody, somebody got nasty because somebody open sourced something on GitHub and there was a bug.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and the reason that guy got nasty is because he didn't know how to do the thing anyway and was running late and just wanted to use a library that would solve his problem. So, I mean, there's, the news is kind of trashy in a lot of ways, right? Unless you're covering the vendors.
And also, it's kind of like it's a show for it's a show that we try to have a broad range from beginners to experts, but also at the same time, we want to give a spot for our peers to just sort of engage in the conversations and topics that they are themselves also thinking about. Because if you actually live this, if you're not trying to, it's like me, when I listen to a financial show, I'm trying to learn everything I can and trying to discover the financial world or whatever. But if you are already in this world, you want a show where you can kind of tune into and sort of hang out with people that are sort of chewing on the same problems you're chewing on and discussing and thinking about the same things you're thinking about. So there's that element of the show too. The show sort of has a multiple levels of appeal we're trying to reach here. You see what I'm saying there, Mr. Dominic? Do you see what I'm saying? And also,
I'd also add one more thing if I can.
Okay, well, yeah, then I have one more thing. Go ahead.
So I know this when I'm listening to other podcasts, right? If it's not something I'm particularly interested in, it feels like it is being discussed more than it really is, right? So fair play to harass Chris a little bit. All the audio stuff on Linux, right? every year, Les does a show. It's like, this is how you do a podcast on Linux. And I'm like, skip.
Yeah.
Right. So there's nothing stopping you from fast forwarding a segment you don't like. And I do that with just about every podcast I listen to because, if you're not actually hosting the show, you're almost never going to be exactly in line with the people hosting it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly true if somebody's making a French press middle of the show. That's just.
Right, or talking about comic books for 30 minutes, which is fine if you like comic books, but if you don't like comic books and you tuned into a show about getting work done, I tease. I guess my point, and the last point I wanted to make is, I think also, I do believe, iOS and Android and mobile are strong repetitive topics in the show because these are the areas of industry right now that are seeing the largest amount of rapid change and growth. And there's so many new dynamics here in terms of like how app stores and how the pricing affects developers and all of this stuff. There's so much that we're still chewing through that it's just kind of going to be natural. Now, years down the road, who knows? Nobody knows. So there you go, Egon. Not that he's listening. We just gave him a really long answer for a show that he's not even listening to anymore.
I know. I hope he is listening because Egon, we miss you.
Oh, I see what I did. I see what I did. I accidentally removed. I wonder if I still have it here in the thingamabobber. Yeah, I do. All right, I got Mike's email here. I thought, see, Matt with 1T, he's tricky. He sent us 2 emails, and I almost attributed one of his emails to Mike. But Mike wrote in, well, I lied. We'll just go to Matt's email because my history, I thought I had it in my history. He says, hi, guys. This is Matt again. Michael often talks about functional programming paradigm. I've never gone to school for CS, but I did learn OOP. And for now, I have a hard time thinking about problems in a different perspective. Could you talk about some use cases where functional is better than OOP? And perhaps suggest some books or resources where I can learn about functional. Thanks, as always, love the Jupiter Broadcasting shows. Matt, the Rogue, with 1T.
Yeah, so that's a very large, very broad, flame-baiting question. I would say that one main advantage of functional programming is avoiding state in your application, right? There's also some speed benefits, and some people would say that it helps you architect your application better. Having said that, I'm a big fan of OO. So, though there are definitely cases where it makes sense. I know a lot of folks in the data sciences are using it. I don't have a tremendous amount of experience using functional programming outside of light functional programming, right? Or using functional options in OO languages. In terms of, I know some people are going functional all out where they can. And I think that's working out for them. But again, the use cases, it's one of those things where until you need it, you don't really need it, right? That was a worthless sentence, I know.
No, it made sense.
Like if you have a OO style app that's running that uses state and is fine, then there's no reason to go back and be like, I'm going to do this in F#.
Right.
And having said that, some functional languages are more or less functional than others, which gets really weird. But look into it. It's worth looking into. But I played with F#. It's definitely a change in thinking, right? You're supposed to avoid mutable types. You're supposed to do everything kind of in its own. There's no state is the bottom line, right? Or you don't want to be keeping state. So, yeah. I guess Java has poisoned my mind.
Speaking of Java, do you want to talk about Pallet Town?
Yeah, so I've been getting a lot of emails about my blog. I have a series called Pallet Town, which for those of you who are not incredibly nerdy, I don't know why you're listening to the show. Pallet Town is the first town in the original Pokemon games. Yes, kids, they were the ones in like green and green.
Yeah, like old school, like Game Boy type graphics.
Exactly. So this is, I've seen a lot of this is how you program, blah, blah, blah. And frankly, they're boring. So I figured, why not fun it up with a little bit of a Pokemon talk? So for instance, we have a ASP.NET example where you're doing some data modeling and some HTTP post GET stuff. with actual Pokemon as your data objects. Right, it's for the kids, Chris. It's for the
fun.
kids.
No, oh. Well, can I like it too?
Yes, you can like it too.
Okay.
People seem to like it. I've received a few complaints that I'm actually starting at too high of a level, right? And I kind of looked back at the ones I've already written. You do have to know a lot of the basics already to even get into them. So now I'm doing this series using Java as the language, which is basic concepts. Now, with every other one of these series I've ever seen written, I'm sure someone's going to flame me about an oversimplification or something like that. That's fine. This week I wrote one called OO in Java, something like that. Basically, it is the very basics for a child or someone new to development to understand the difference between a class and an object, right? And parameters and all that kind of thing. Not parameters, I'm sorry, properties and that kind of thing. So if you have young kids, especially if they're Pokemon fans, have them take a look. It's obviously totally free. It's just on the web. There are code samples in there, and it has a fun little picture from the old Game Boy game.
Yeah, that's what caught my attention.
Yeah.
Very nice, Mr. Dominic. Very nice. It's fun for kids of all ages, including adult kids. All right.
Kids named Chris.
Well, before we get into the rest of our show, I do want to take a moment right here and thank our first sponsor, and that is the fantastic folks over at Ting.com, because Ting is mobile that makes sense. And here's where you go to get it all started. Go to coderradio.ting.com. That way you can take advantage of some of the great deals over at Ting. So first of all, let's talk about the rates. There's a lot of really great things about Ting. No early terminations, fees, no contracts, and an incredibly straightforward and easy-to-use dashboard. But what I really think is unique about Ting is the way they build. They take your minutes, your megabytes, and your messages, they add them all up, and whatever bucket you fall into at the end of the month, that's what you pay. So you don't end up paying extra and wasting a bunch of money for a plan you don't use fully, and you don't get these massive penalties when you go a little bit outside the box that the carrier has set up for you. And all of this is every single month, month to month, just as you want it. You can have as many lines as you want, $6 flat rate, and then you just pay for what you use. That is super straightforward. It's great for teams. And it's also great if you need to test on several devices for your application. Maybe you need an older Android phone and a newer Android phone, something with Android 2, something with Android 4, etc. The great thing about Ting is you don't have that gadget guilt where you have a device sitting around and you're not using it very much, but you're paying into some big contract. You can put that device on that desk and you only have to pay for it when you use it. Then again, flip side, if you have a busy couple of months like I always do as the holidays come up, I don't have to worry about going way over because I like to have all my pictures sync as I'm taking them. I mean, my data usage can go way up during the holidays. So that's what's really, really comforting about Ting. Now, they're also doing something that's pretty unique. I don't know of anybody else that offers this, an early termination relief program. So if you want to get into Ting, because it's fantastic savings, especially when you go to coderradio.ting.com, because you're going to start there, they're going to take $25 off your first device. If you bring your own device, they're going to give you a $25 discount on your first month of service, which could end up being free if you're like me. Here's the sweet thing, though. Early termination relief. All you got to do, you grab a device, you port your number over to Ting, and then you submit your ETF claim from your current carrier. You know, those guys that have ETFs. Ting's going to take $75 per device out of that. Boom! Takes that sting right out. Boom! How about that? You can find out more if you go to ting.com/ETF. Go take a look at their devices. They got a whole range of contract-free high-end devices, mid-range devices, and even devices that start as low as $63 once you apply our discount. $63 for an off-contract, no early terminations, pay for what you use plan. That is incredible. So go get started by going to coderradio.ting.com. And thanks to Ting for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. Been loving Android 4.3 on the HTC One. Do you have 4.3 on that Moto X of yours?
I do. Actually,
it's not 4.2 or something?
I think it's 3. It got an update the other day.
Okay. All right. So you're legit is what you're saying. You're legit.
I am legit, as they say.
Now, why don't we just give a quick little discussion here to Apple's announcements that came up. We didn't get the Google Nexus 5 announcement, although now the rumor is November 1st. So it could be pretty soon. Did you have any takeaways from it?
You know, it was surprising in a way.
What? Really?
I really didn't expect the Retina iPad mini.
Okay.
Because I thought they are in love with thick, juicy margins. When it comes to margins, they're the Sir Mix-a-Lot of the business world, right?
Yeah.
You know, if you yank out buns, they don't want you. That was terrible. So, I'm thinking Tim Cook's up there, gold chains, backwards cap. He's not going to go for some flimsy 45% margin, 50 or nothing. I did not consider that he may keep around a 3-year-old device,
the iPad 2,
keep last year's device, and make another category with those thick, fat, juicy margins that they like so much.
So, the main way they pulled that off is by putting the A7 in both the Air and the Mini.
Yeah.
And so this is going to push 64-bit out to a lot more devices a lot faster than I expected.
Which is why I'm like, shit.
Yeah, so, because I honestly thought the way they traditionally would have done this is the Mini would have gotten the A6, right?
Right, yeah, and so the Mini would have gotten the A6, not had a Retina display, and only the high end would be the A7, right?
Now you got every iPhone 5S running a 64-bit chip, and you got every iPad Air and Mini that's going to sell over this holiday season with a 64-bit chip in it.
Yeah.
So it seems like if you're making iOS software, you got to get a 64-bit device.
Yeah, that's my feeling. So they're saying it's not going to be much of an issue. I frankly don't believe that. So I am going to go ahead and pick up a 64-bit device. Not terribly happy about it. Chris, I don't know if you've ever noticed these iDevices are a little pricey.
Yeah, now I'm in the market because I actually ruined one of mine during a Coda Radio, and so I've been waiting for them to come out, and I think I'm gonna pick one up because it's such a hit with the kids.
Right.
And I think the Air is probably the device I will get. I found this whole announcement process to be pretty underwhelming, to be honest with you. I feel like if Apple really wanted to impress me with the iPad, they would have announced, along with the iPad Air, an iPad Pro. Maybe it would have had connectivity of some kind, maybe like some sort of video output, maybe. That'd be crazy. I know that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Extended battery life, something, I guess I feel like they're leaving this massive spot open for like professional grade business tablets.
So that's where I'm at, because as I'm using tablets more and more, I'm realizing that, okay, these are at the point where they don't need to be consumption devices. And I'm kind of, cue the Microsoft fanboys, looking for a keyboard. Now, I know there's that very nice Logitech one, but that's another $80, right?
Yeah, if it's worth it for the apps, though, then...
That's the thing. I'm almost feeling like... So first of all, they named it the iPad Air, not the iPad. Which I'm wondering, is there an iPad Pro? And is that...
Next year.
Next year, and going to have a keyboard, right?
Doesn't it come down to what are you going to make apps for? You're not going to make apps for a Surface. Are you? You are! I'm not laughing at you, man. Good luck with that. I mean, I'm proud of you for being bold and a risk taker.
Wait. No one said that. Hang on.
What you got to do? Here's an idea. Make apps for Linux and Surface. That way you really cover your bases. What are you going to do with all that money rolling in?
It's just funny because no one makes money on either platform. This got really sad.
I think we're going to probably get a lot of hate mail for that one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you can send your hate mail to Alan, the PHP fan, at JupiterBroadcasting.com.
He's a jackass.
Alan Alan went in a pretty good PHP defense the other day on the.
I heard it. I feel like someone emailed him with the intent of being a troll.
That was Ben, yeah.
Yeah.
And then he took it to Twitter too. He took the fight to Twitter.
And I was just like, why do we have to do this again?
Oh man. So okay, but all seriousness aside, I mean all joking aside.
Oh, we've already put the seriousness aside. We're good.
I kind of. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I guess, it seems like the turn rate on tablets is much higher than it is on PCs.
Right. People are 1 to 2 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's more like mobile phones.
So you could have somebody break in, maybe, during like a switchover cycle. Like, I think what we just saw was a lot of really good products from Apple, but nothing's really going to move the dial in this race too much. I think it's just going to, people who like iPads will buy iPads, and people who want to get, something else will get something. I don't see how this is going to change much. And, Paul Thurrott made the astute point that what did they say? They sold like 170 million iPads or something like that.
Yeah, something ludicrous. Yeah,
right. But that works out to be 6 months, is it, of PC sales?
Exactly.
So in all of the iPad's life, they've sold 6 months worth of PCs.
Yeah, I mean that's the reality of the market right now. You know, not to say that WinRT is going to take the world by storm, because I think it's pretty clear that it hasn't. But WinRT, the reason for it to exist has been solved by Intel. So couldn't Microsoft just go back and be like, so we're not doing this anymore? You know what I mean? And
the ARM aspect of it?
Right, just drop ARM. Because they're not hitting the price points they need to hit. But that's not even the point. I mean, getting back to the whole Apple event, one of my main things is they released exactly what we thought they were going to release, which is probably the worst thing they could have done, right?
Yeah, I can't tell, man. I can't tell because, this goes back even to Ubuntu 13.10, and I look at Mavericks, and to here I see two operating systems that have gotten to a point that they're just kind of polishing now and making better. And I actually think that's what they've done with the iPad too, and it's probably what consumers want across the board. I don't think this is what maybe you or I or enthusiasts want, but I think the fact that Angela's mom and dad, who really don't know anything about computers and I would say are technophobic, the fact that their iPads just upgraded to iOS 7 and they didn't shit a brick, they were just like, oh yeah, all my stuff's still in the same spot, it just looks different. That's kind of a big deal, actually. That's execution.
Okay, but the only person out there bricking my Vivo tab when they update it is Microsoft, right? Google doesn't have that problem. Sorry, Microsoft. There's a difference between stagnating but being polished and being a little more risky and a little less polished and bricking your device, right? If you want to compare it to the RT update experience, which we haven't talked about yet, it was a disaster.
All right, tell me about it. What happened?
All right, so I have my Vivo tab, which I actually like a lot. I'm one of the few people who is kind of I like the idea of a tablet that has a keyboard that is just naturally, a tablet with a keyboard, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's part of the deal. So I waited a day or two to get the WinRT update, and I guess I must have gotten it just before Microsoft pulled it, because that did not work.
Yeah. Oh, I heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It bricked a few machines, including the Surface.
Right. And so, I mean, if the Surface is bricked, what chance does somebody running a third-party system have, right?
This is going to happen, though. When they did this, when they released Surface and Windows RT, they kind of hit the reset button. They're kind of shipping a 1.0 in a way. I mean, it's a pretty good 1.0, but it's a 1.0, and this is where you see it, is where they got to do mass deployments. They have to push out updates. This is just not. It's going to take Microsoft a long time to transition from just being the software vendor to being a software vendor that has to work so closely with hardware, and in some cases be also the hardware vendor. That's a cultural shift. That's a huge shift for a company.
It is, but again, one of the cornerstones of these tablets, at least in my opinion, is they work. They might have stuff missing, all of the iPad, and they might have no apps, all of the Surface, but they work, right? This is not...
They're appliance level almost.
Right, exactly. So that doesn't seem to be the case, right?
I've felt that on occasions with my original Nexus 7, where when the battery would fully die, it would go into this horrible reboot loop where you couldn't charge it, and I just kind of felt like the feeling I walk away with is these devices are supposed to be of a generation where we've solved some of these fundamentals, and we're on to different challenges now.
Exactly.
And if you can't take care of some of the basics, then maybe, you don't have all your ducks in a row. You shouldn't be playing on this field. I can see where you're coming from.
It just feels like, and I know we're way off topic, but it feels like the whole Surface 8.1 thing was what I call date-driven development, right? We had a ship date that we had to commit to, so we pushed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not great. I mean, let's say that they are saying it was less than 1% of the market it happened to.
I love it when they always say that. Yet I've heard from like 2 or 3 people that have it. So boy, I guess I must know the 1% or something.
Well, the other issue is that it doesn't just break your thing. Like I've had iOS updates break devices, particularly on betas, and that's to be expected. But at least you plug it into the computer and it just resets by itself, right? Literally, it comes up, this thing is in bad shape. Would you like us to factory reset it?
Yeah, but there is a way to do that on your tablet.
Oh, yeah, but you have to open up the C prompt on the tablet, right? You have to do some voodoo with the volume switch to get there and type in a bunch of archaic DOS commands, which, sure, you also have to to get an ISO of the RT operating system from Microsoft and put that on there.
Get it out of here.
Right. I'm totally capable of doing all of those things. I shouldn't have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? I'm going to take it to the Microsoft store and bitch them out.
So when you say nothing surprised you, maybe that's not so bad. It's easy. I mean, the only thing that surprised you really was the part that's going to be a biggest pain in the ass for development. That is more 64-bit across the line.
Right.
That's really the big surprise, and ironically, the one that'll probably have the biggest impact for delivering software. I thought. Oh, one other note I just wanted to note too is, I think they did pitch it as more of a professional line device. They pitched it as, all of the use case videos they had, people were using them in like a job, in like work. They had them in scientific applications. They had them in medical. That's a good spot for them to position that for developers, because when you enter a higher, when it becomes a work grade device, you can charge more for your applications.
Right. No, I'm not super.
Unless it's your OS, then you give that away for free now.
Naturally, I mean.
Right.
I just feel like Windows 8 is not as bad as people say, but when you drop the ball like that, they're not doing themselves any favors, right? And I mean that in a very, very big way. Even you can go on about Android being fragmented. Android doesn't even have this problem, right?
Right. Yeah.
Most people who are bricking their Android devices are bricking them because they're trying to do their own thing.
Right. But you really don't hear of like Samsung or HTC One trashing their device when they do push out an update.
Exactly.
Or which is interesting too, because like to your point of fragmentation there, they would in theory have a much more complicated set of circumstances that they have to work within than the Microsoft RT update. If there's not very many devices. And it would also seem like it also, I guess, do you know what the cause was? Because it seems like it.
So it seems like mum's the word, right? I haven't been able to find the cause, but I was very curious to. Do you know?
No, I don't. And it's so strange that they have those devices in house. But what I did hear was it only you would not get it if you had been upgrading from like the betas of 8.1. It was only when you went from straight 8.0 to 8.1 that you caught it. And so one of the reasons they didn't
so it only affected normal customers.
Right.
Fantastic.
So the people who were dog fooding in house didn't have the problem because they had been running beta builds for a while and just kept doing updates through their update server. And so they'd never really bit by it. That's all. That's the only scuttlebutt I've heard, and
that's awful. If that's really the case, that's really bad. I mean, I listen to, if you want to, we just rename Windows Weekly Group Therapy Radio.
I know, right? No, we've got that name taken.
Yeah, this is an incredible screw up, right? It's not even like, okay, iOS 7 had glitches, right? I think our good friend Barack has even mentioned them several times. He's got an iPhone, and there have been some problems.
He's a jackass.
Thank you, Barack. But they didn't brick his phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I have certainly consumer updates shouldn't be bricking devices.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I mean, that's kind of like that's not as bad as a Windows update. But it's as bad as like when they pushed out a service pack that nuked Windows installations. Like if that.
So even if it nukes your device, there should be a way to just restore it to factory, right? Without going to the C prompt.
Is this not Microsoft's technical debt biting them in the ass? Because they are pushing an operating system You look at, okay, one of the key differences about Android and iOS is these things were built to run as images from ROMs. Like from day one, that's what these things have always done. They've always had, this mindset when they're developing the operating system. Windows is used to having a disk with partitions and an active boot partition and all of these things that they have now translated to the tablet device. It's not born of the tablet. I know that sounds heady, but I think it actually impacts the way
if that's really so. At first, when I saw the issue, I thought it was because I was running a third-party device, right? That maybe because ASUS doesn't support the platform anymore, so maybe it was like a driver thing. And then some quick searching, not with Google, with DuckDuckGo. It just seems silly. Like I'm going to go to the Microsoft store and I'm going to be there for 4 hours, and it's going to be awesome.
For a device that was supposed to add features that it probably should have had at launch. Or for an update.
The reason I whipped out the Surface is because it was a Sunday afternoon. I was on my porch and I wanted to just type out a few emails, right?
So SnakeDoc says there's a pinhole button you can press that'll reset it, that'll flash it back to stock 8.0. Is that true?
I did not find it. Where is this pinhole button?
I don't know. SnakeDoc says it's true.
No, he says, why not have a pinhole button?
Oh, yeah, I know. Where like there's a little bootloader that just re-images it or something. Yeah, exactly.
So my Dell that I wiped the into, I could probably re-image the Windows in like 3 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just off the fact that if not, I could get a disk and do it. Which is basically what they're telling me to do with the tablet, but I don't know. I mean, we've been on this way too long.
All right. Any other topics? Any other thoughts on the Apple stuff?
I don't want to spend $500.
Yeah. Tax write-off. I know.
Although T-Mobile giving away free data might get me to actually make that $600. But.
It only makes... You got to get it with... you have to, because if you want GPS functionality, you got to get it with the cellular, even if you don't activate it.
That's right.
Yeah. And when it comes down to there's so much stuff that's just geo stuff now. All right. Well, before we get into the back-end stuff, I want to thank our second sponsor this week, and that is GoDaddy.com. GoDaddy.com has a $1.99 deal for you guys for a .com. If you go over there, use the code CODER199 when you're checking out at GoDaddy.com. You get your .com for $1.99. Friends, when a .com is $1.99, there's so many beautiful things you can do. I got jbtitles.com. jbtitles.com forwards now to our voting page where people can help select our titles, which nobody in our chat room has suggested a title yet because they are failing us as we do the show right now. But if they weren't failing us horribly, at the end of the show, we'd all go to jbtitles.com. Now, I didn't have to have some complicated server. I don't have to have some WordPress site running somewhere where I've done all that stuff, even though GoDaddy makes it crazy easy to set that up. All I did, I logged into my GoDaddy admin panel, went into the domain management, chose my new domain from my list of many domains, and then click forward. You just click forward. You go in there, it drops down a really easy to use GUI to set up where you want to forward to, either permanently, temporarily, and you can even do masking. And it makes all that great, simple, and straightforward. And with the .com for $1.99 now there's never been a better time. Never ever will be a better time. I don't think you can go cheaper than $1.99, so do it while we still can. Use the code CODER199 over at GoDaddy.com. They're kicking it up a notch too. So if you work in a small business or a group of people, there's so many great things GoDaddy's working on right now to help you get even more work done, to make your business run even smoother. They've got all kinds of great new services over there. They're rolling out new stuff. So go over to GoDaddy.com and check it out and get yourself a .com for $1.99 with the code CODER199. And thanks to GoDaddy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. Okay, Mr. Dominic, why don't we move into the back-end stuff? And I want to start with a question for you, sir. When do I need a back-end? And why do I need a back-end?
Well, you need a back-end if you're persisting state via your application to a server, Chris.
Well said. Well said. So, so an example is the Audible app. In the Audible app, when I play on my tablet and then close it and open it up on my HTC One, even though one is an iPad and one is an Android device, the Audible app syncs between them, my position, my chapter, and all that kind of information. It's not using iCloud for that, and it's not using Google Messaging for that. It's using some sort of Audible backend for that.
Right, yes.
That kind of thing. Okay.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're talking about. So basically, you're interacting with a server that's interacting with a database. How do you feel about databases, Chris?
Databases are, well, actually, I'm not a big fan of databases. To be fully fair, I like databases themselves. I just don't usually like the software that runs them.
Oh.
Now, maybe you can change my mind on that, but I've never...
Sounds like we've got a little sysadmin pie going on here.
Yeah. Thing is they're a pain in the butt to back up.
Yes. So, deployment has been an issue for me recently because deployment's been in the ass.
Yeah.
So, could we say I've been on a little safari of backend frameworks?
I've noticed this. You've been surfing that safari.
Yes. Wow.
Get out of here.
And, I really like my curly braces and state, right? So I quickly found that .NET is the best programming framework you could possibly be using.
Oh, well, that's solved.
And I'll just give the chat room a few seconds to digest that.
To own it, really.
To own it, really. Just to feel the burn. But no. So, I kind of fell in love with Java Play. And the reason for that is Java Play doesn't suck. I mean that in a very big way. It's got all of the OO goodness and the ease of development from Rails with a nice, easy state-based language. And I don't know why we're on the Vue right now. But I had one problem. Java Play deployment to Heroku is basically broken.
Right, I remember this.
It may not be the case anymore. There are a few specialty solutions, but again, that stuff's really pricey. And I want to be down to the metal these days. So what we've been doing is actually spinning up VMs. And believe it or not, are you ready for this, Chris?
I'm ready.
Docker.
Oh, really?
Yes.
So are you sort of rolling your own backend infrastructure right now with this?
So we're tying together Docker with with another open source library called Dooku, which actually gives you a very Heroku-like deployment situation.
So what is Dooku lets you push it out to servers and stuff like that, or what?
Exactly, and it manages dependencies, yeah.
So
along with Docker.
So for those of you who didn't catch our Docker interview weeks back, Docker is a open source project to create lightweight, portable, self-sufficient containers for many applications. You can set up an environment in there, and then that just sort of becomes a safe place for the application that you have in there.
Exactly.
And then, so tell me, to explain a little bit to this push aspect of it. So can you just have like a server out there, and you can take Dooku and say, all right, send this Docker image to this server, or how does this work?
That's pretty much exactly right. Sends the Docker image, and it tries to build it on the server just like Heroku, right? And it responds with any errors. Now, the advantage to this is, of course, we could continue doing continuous deployment, continuous integration, whichever. I know they're not the same thing, but the disadvantage is that we now have to maintain some servers, right?
Yes. Now, Docker takes some of the sting out of that, because one of the problems with maintaining your own server is there an update I need to worry about that breaks something? Is there, or you actually even just some of the pressures in some of the server configuration are removed because everything in that Docker environment is isolated, it's protected. What about updating the Docker environment itself, the container?
So that is something you have to handle.
Yeah.
But again, if you're doing production deployment, you're probably not updating major things you've deployed often, right?
Are you moving around over there?
Sorry, my chair started sliding away on its own. It was creepy. I was like, no.
I follow you. So this is interesting because this is kind of in the back of my mind. I've been thinking about redoing some of the Jupyter Broadcasting internal infrastructure, and I've been thinking about using Docker as sort of a safe spot, and then running a much more fluid server operating system underneath it.
Yeah, so we're deploying to Ubuntu 13.04. So we're still using our LTS love.
12.04 is LTS, 13.04 is not.
I'm sorry, 12.04.
Yeah.
It's been pretty smooth. It's been much smoother than we would have thought. I mean, it took about a day of configuration and all that kind of crap. There are a few pain points still, right? you really, really should, if you're doing this kind of deployment scenario, have a good testing strategy in mind. Not just manual testing, but also unit testing, right? Which is something we're definitely working on. Because, when it's so easy to push up to production, one of two things will happen. You become afraid to push to production, right? And the longer you go without doing it, the harder it's going to get.
Yeah.
Or do you do it so much that you're constantly in this scenario where you've broken something live and you have to hurry up and fix it?
Right.
So that's not great. And where, I'll be honest, for me, it's a little bit of a cultural shift for this automated testing stuff. It's one of those things where you're spending time writing these tests that you don't really see any positive gains, right? The whole idea is that you're writing the test and it's going to prevent some theoretical future problem. So the issue is obviously that it's hard to really quantify the value of that, right?
Yeah, and when you're busy and stressed out, it can be difficult even more so.
Right. So it's a cultural shift, particularly for me. I have some concerns around the whole testing thing. I think there is this whole culture of, I would say, ridiculousness in it, right? Where, for one thing, most issues people are going to complain about are not going to be database issues, right? It's always going to be UI. There's a few reasons for that.
They don't see the database issues.
Right. And even if there are database issues, they won't want to sound silly, and they probably don't understand the issue, so they won't want to bring it up, right? Or they won't discuss it in depth.
Right.
But they will sure as hell, especially if it's a meeting with a group of people, everybody's got to get their 2 cents in. They will sure as hell beat you down about a shade of blue.
Yeah, because everybody can have an opinion.
Everybody can have an opinion.
Yep.
So one of the main issues with the testing stuff is with the exception of some recent Azure shenanigans, really haven't had too many back-end deployment issues. But the front end is always an area where people want to talk about colors or changes. And I would really like there to be a solution for that, right?
Now, how can you ever fix that? That's human nature.
Well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'd fix that.
Because this just seems like, your only option there is to go like all GNOME or whatever, and people will be like, this is your option. You get this, or you get nothing. But you're not going to get a lot of clients doing that.
Right.
And, the flip side is you're not going to get a lot of new users if you never respond to the changes they want.
Right. So it's difficult, right? Because in a way, you're not optimizing, or I feel like the unit testing thing on the back end is not giving us the value where we really need the value, right?
Yeah.
And not to say that these issues are huge, but there is a bottom line effect to 5 hours here, 2 hours there kind of things, right? So I'm not totally sold yet. And, I've looked into UI testing frameworks, and they don't really exist, which is interesting.
Gosh, it seems like such a hard thing.
And that's what it is, right? And that's what makes it hard from a consulting perspective, is because, one situation that's very common is you're dealing with one person for just about the entirety of the contract. That person goes on like maternity leave or something like that. And the next guy aesthetically just has a totally different taste.
Or they weren't, or like the guy above him, they weren't communicating properly. He had a different set of expectations. And that's one that has bitten me in the past is I'll come in, I'll do my first initial meeting. I'll talk to the CEO. We'll talk about big picture. And then I'll go spend 6 months with the IT guy. And then after that 6 months, it's sort of like he's sort of built over that 6 months a wall between me and the CEO. And then, of course, he steps away for a little while, and CEO turns out to have a whole separate set of expectations. I could see the same thing for, in a programming situation. You're developing something for a client. You're working with somebody, and then towards the end of the day, the stakeholders all come in and they sit down to review what they've done, and they say, "Well, wait a minute, this doesn't look like our site at all. This isn't going to fit. The color isn't right, et cetera, et cetera."
Right. It's difficult, and certainly having a paper trail is obviously going to be helpful.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But there are cases when, of course, there are misunderstandings in terms of visuals, and it would be really great to be able to write tests against that, right?
Um, I guess that's what I was going to ask you is, doesn't using something like Docker and Dooku sort of give you the ability to build up your own quote unquote library of back-end parts that when it comes time to do something, you can say, all right, well, we can spend a little more time nitpicking on the front end and burning the midnight oil there, because we're going to just sort of inherit a lot of the stuff we've already built from a previous deployment, and we'll just take Docker and Dooku and we'll just deploy what we've done before and then build on top of it. So in a way, aren't you kind of, once you've ran as this setup for a while, going to open up yourself to some availability for that kind of back and forth little chicken-esque stuff?
So that's certainly the theory. And I'm hoping it's true.
Yeah.
I feel like what's going to happen is as efficiencies start to be shown in invoices and reports, people are just going to expect that to be passed on to them.
Yeah, I could see that. I wonder how that's where you have to have a little marketing magic in there to kind of obfuscate that a little bit, maybe? I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but yeah.
So to not show where time went.
Right, because it is just smart business for you to develop a back-end system that is easily repeatable for you to save you time on future projects. So and that's the advantage of going with your own Linux server, deploying Dockers. You now own that entire stack. Like, you could redeploy any aspect of that stack for any other task, and you sort of saved yourself all of that setting up and discovery time. But that's just good business. That's like, you don't rebuy a whole toolbox every time you go fix somebody's sink.
Oh, exactly. I mean, honestly, a lot of the tool shifting has been thanks to one vendor giving out freebies.
Yeah, Alex Bell has picked up on our corporate speak with stakeholders and paper trails. This is the world, Alex Bell, that when you go in with clients, this is how you talk. This is how they talk. That's, Well,
this is, I mean, in a lot of ways, this is like everyday stuff, right?
Yeah, unfortunately.
And I don't know where that leaves us, but a little sad.
Well, I think you're in a transition phase with it.
I think we are too. I think it's going to be a little. I think it's going to be a little more time-consuming than I would like, and I'm still not 100% sold on the real value of some of these things.
I think you could potentially. So, for owning the technology that you build and sell, I can see the advantage there, right? And for like trying different stuff out, and it gives you a safety net with snapshots. It makes backups super easy. It makes deployment to new servers with Dooku. Sounds like that makes it a snap.
Oh, however, yeah. So just for the backup stuff, I mean, it's kind of worth its weight in gold, right? I mean, that's what makes it worth the risk of this stuff, not.
And it makes it fast.
Right.
But here's where I see problems is like, all of this is great until you decide to do something that really has to scale. And then that's where some of these other cloud systems become a little more attractive, as they can handle that load, right? Whereas if you're rolling all this back-end technology on your own, if you're going to have 100,000 users in a day, you need to be able to hold that load. Whereas something like S3 is going to scale up just fine to that. Or Rackspace or Azure, whatever you want to put it on. So that would probably be like, that seems like a potential downside to rolling your own backend. However, not all use cases, some use cases are like you said, just state information. And you could have, that could scale to tens of thousands of users if you're just flipping a bit in a database when they close the app or open the app, right? I mean, so it kind of depends on the work case.
And let's be honest. I mean, most applications, especially if they're internal business applications, don't need that kind of scalability, right?
Right. It's generally not unless you're serving up some portion of content or something.
And additionally, I'm finding a lot of people have definitely tightened their belt on what they're willing to pay for to maintain a server.
Uh-huh.
So I actually have folks moving away from EC2 because they can't get a fixed price.
Yeah,
right?
It gets expensive. And if you have the resources, you can resell it on your own.
Right, and that's the idea, right? The idea would be that, and this is something I just say in general for even our own projects, if we're at the point where we need to go to a cloud for capacity, it usually means that we should have enough revenue
Right.
to afford that.
Yeah, hopefully.
And to be able to afford the cost to do that quickly.
Yeah.
Now, if your model is to not generate revenue, well, then, I tend to not recommend
I guess
that.
even then, though, I still feel like you're kind of making a safe play because Docker is fundamentally portable. And these containers could be lifted and moved to a Docker
bigger server.
Yeah, like it's not like you have to go get an ISO and install all the packages, right? It's like there's people out there that are ready to take your Docker image today and run it.
Well, don't forget, even without those people, nothing stops me from being like, I'll take a big Ubuntu server and load my Docker on it, do the install, right? I could write a Ruby script to do that.
Well, or if you knew like, hey, we're going to launch this week, or we're going to launch version 2.0 this week, and we expect traffic to be 10x, then for that week, you run your Docker image on that Rackspace instance, right? And then when that week's over, you can move it back to your cheaper server. So there is some pretty nice flexibility there.
There are options. I mean, it's funny, Chris, but all this cloud stuff, all this auto scaling servers,
yeah,
I'm seeing more and more people move away from it as, well, wait, how much do they want?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole thing about the cloud is about reoccurring revenues for these companies. And
right. and the sad part is, colos have kind of been slapped in the face, but there are vendors, like GoDaddy and a few other companies who will lease you either hardware servers or physical or virtual servers with reasonable speeds, reasonable bandwidth that for most people, $100 a month will do them just fine virtually forever.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, 100 is probably way more than they need to spend on just server hosting.
Meanwhile, though, I've had clients that spend several $1,000, $3,000-$4,000 a month on renting out a couple of racks in a data center and paying for the bandwidth. And for them, they looked at it as, first of all, it was a tax write-off. It was an ongoing business expense, and the hardware was a business. So all of that angle of it. But they just as a business wanted to own the hardware that their website runs on. And that's how they generated all their revenue, was through their website. And so for them, it wasn't even so much about the running costs because they were willing to pay more to just completely own it top to bottom.
Well, I've also had a few calls about security concerns, particularly with clients who are in Europe or Canada, about Amazon EC2, Windows, Azure, things like that are physically in the United States. Yeah. I mean, I think the days of smaller firms purchasing servers, getting the static IP from their IP vendor, and actually running their own server are still behind us.
Yeah.
But certainly leasing servers from not even a colo, but from some vendor who promises where they are seems to be becoming popular again.
It seems like a pulling back a bit, like we all sort of overindulged in this, and now we're like, well, not for all use cases, actually. And
even my own, like looking at my own just ongoing billing for like Heroku, I'm paying a lot of money for very little computing power, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not a lot in terms of, I'm not paying thousands a month, but it's
for what you get, price
for what I'm getting. It's certainly, I could have bought a Dell server a long time ago,
right?
Paid, called Verizon, said I wanted a static IP.
Docker makes it surprisingly safer in a way too. Like, and I know it's different too. It's a full-on container. What's interesting about Docker is that it gives you sort of this freedom to mess it up a little bit, and your whole, like in the old days of your own co-located server, like. And virtualization solved this problem to a big degree, but the problem with virtualization is the performance overhead. And so if you really wanted raw performance, what all really popular websites would end up doing is going metal. And they would run an OS, and they would have to update those OSs, and they would have to install the packages, and they would have to maintain, at scale, all of the servers that they use to maintain their site. And now with Docker, it's like, that OS still has to be maintained, but it is completely detached from the functioning of the services that run on the OS, and that's huge. That sort of fundamentally changes co-hosted servers, because you don't have to have the virtualization penalty, and you also don't have to have that situation where you could fundamentally screw something up just by doing an update. It's kind of a big deal. So it kind of makes co-located servers much more practical, or whatever, co-located or self-hosted, whatever you want to call it. More practical.
Exactly. And I don't want to hit this too hard about the effect of the Snowden stuff, but there has been an effect, right?
Even if it just makes people think a little bit about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And, now I'm hearing, okay, so I had one guy call me and say, well, the Snowden guy was an admin, right? Yes. Well, doesn't Amazon have admins too?
Oh, watch out for sysadmins. They're bad.
Well, but I mean, it's a little outlandish.
No, but it's right, though.
There is a kernel of truth, right? Some guy gets fired for maybe inappropriate chain letters.
You should tell him that the federal government has assessed that for leaks, sysadmins in their mid to late 20s and early 30s are the highest risk target they see in terms of breaching and doing things for patriotic reasons. So he's right. As somebody who fits into that category, that's what the federal government's warning people about.
Exactly. I'm not sure how we got there, but okay.
Well, you brought up so I think it's funny because even like Alex Bell's pointing out, if there's really no reason for these companies to be worried about the NSA, it's like one of these things where
this guy does inventory, right? There's nothing to worry about.
But it's obviously on people's minds. That's the thing, and it is factoring in the decision process because if it's, I guess what people think is, well, if today it's the NSA, then in 5 years it could be somebody else, right? It could be a private company who does it to make money, right? Maybe some company hires a sysadmin from Amazon and says, hey man, if you give us some usernames and passwords, we'll pay you $30 million. So it could be anything. I mean, I'm totally pulling that in my ass, but it just gets people thinking about the possibility. It doesn't have to be the NSA boogeyman.
No.
Although they are going to get us all. Let's be honest.
Well, naturally. It's we're gonna see how this all plans out. I don't see. I mean, Pandora's box has been opened in terms of the cloud, right?
Yeah.
And I don't see a real backslide.
Well, and there's a lot of practical reasons for it too. Sometimes fast deployment and fast scalability are worth their weight in gold.
In other cases, though, certainly using a Heroku for prototyping is a good idea, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, why spend huge portion of your upfront time building up a server when you could just use a Heroku image?
But as the longer you run that instance, the more expensive it's going to get. And I think for a lot of small to medium business, there's going to come a point where first of all, Heroku is a bad example because it's more expensive than EC2, right? Because they're upcharging EC2.
Yeah.
So there probably will be a point where for a lot of businesses' needs, that's not necessary, right?
Sure.
Having said that, I really don't think we're going to see newer companies bring servers in that don't need them. Honestly, mainly because of the telcos. They nickel and dime you on, oh, well, now you're at the business class, and here's, $20 per static IP, and our SLA is not good, and all this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's never been enough to make people avoid it before, but I suppose if there's a whole other stack of reasons, those are just a couple of more, right? It's kind of like, well, we got to do this.
It's just another hassle they have to deal with, right?
The other thing, too, is not really as much as a practical matter, but there's more and more businesses that are quote-unquote virtual businesses where they don't have, like, a specific spot where they all, like, they either have shared workspaces or they work over the internet, and these are, not as common as a brick and mortar office, I would assume, but where are those people going to put their servers? Where those people don't have room they don't even have an office. They're not going to have a data center. So you could see where a company like that would want to use all hosted services as much as possible because they're not paying rent on a room somewhere to put servers and cool them.
No, that's very true. I feel like we've made each other a little sad here. I don't think the cloud is in trouble at all.
I'm not sad. I'm good.
You're good?
I'm good because I actually think you have actually kind of arrived at the same point I have where I'm like, I'll use cloud for some stuff, cloud hosted services for some stuff, and I'm going to go local for a lot of stuff. And I'm just going to kind of figure out which is the best for that work case. And let's be honest, it's thanks to Docker in a huge way. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I think we're just kind of discovering the sweet spot.
I also think, should we hit this pretty hard?
Do it. Hit it. Smack it.
I think becoming harder and harder to afford proprietary solutions for your backend infrastructure. For instance,
and there's less advantages to it as well.
Right. So, the licensing on SQL Server.
Horrible.
I don't know if anybody's actually looked at that, who's in the chat room. That is going to cost you more than your hardware. Yeah. I mean, it just seems like that's not something people should be doing, right?
Now that kind of database is of a different era for software that is, very heavily networked, and it's like rich side client apps for like, inventory systems and
but I'm still seeing it deployed. And I'm
for
seeing
what though? What kind of work use? It's not for
I'm seeing it deployed for like backends, for REST backends.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I hear about that too, and I also even hear about like MMOs that use SQL Server for backends and stuff. And I always just think it doesn't seem like the best use case.
Well, it seems like a very expensive use case, and they say there's metrics that you'll get it all back.
No.
Yeah, maybe. Right?
I don't know. Maybe if somebody wants to write in, CodaRadio@JupiterBroadcasting.com and correct us on this, but I think you're right. I think the as far as also, let's be honest, the internet, web apps, and mobile apps are all pushing the profit margins down on this kind of stuff, and so there's kind of these huge iron back-end proprietary solutions are being eaten away at from both ends. From the fact that the open and free stuff is getting pretty capable and in most cases does the job, and it's seen, every large web company is using them, right?
Right.
And then at the other end of it, you have the profit margins that are completely shrinking, so people can't afford these expensive backends. So they're really getting eaten at from two ends at once. It's not. I just can't see it working much longer in the current setup. $10,000 for a dual processor version.
Yeah, so that's the thing. I'm seeing companies try to cut their IT as much as possible, and licensing fees, to me, seem like a whole lot of fat you could trim. Especially when they're, shall we say it, a little thick. Sir Mix-a-Lot, you got anything?
Yeah, he does like it thick, doesn't he? And round. I'm not going to go any farther than that. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
This has been a very mellow show. I think Egon brought us down.
Oh, curmudgeon.
Inappropriate? Oh, I love Egon. He's my favorite ghost hunter.
All right. Well, so there you go. So you are transitioning from, gosh, I feel like we've gone from Heroku and we've journeyed to Azure, and now we are journeying back to roll it on Docker, and we'll run it ourselves. Now, it helps when you have a few people on a team to do it too. Let's be clear. It's not
it's
scalable.
Not yeah.
So there's that to factor into. All right, Mr. Dominic, what are your thoughts on that topic?
No, that's about it.
All right. Well, I'd like to instruct people with a very, very important message. I want to give you basically the keys to the kingdom. Go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com, click on Coda Radio 73, find our contact links. You can get Mr. Dominic's Twitter account. You can get his business Twitter handle. You can even find his blog. It's all linked over there, but we're not even going to stop there. Check this out. Go to the top of our website, smack that contact button, and send us an email, and we'll read it on a future episode of Coda Radio. Mr. Dominic, you have yourself a great week. We'll see you next Monday, okay?
Do.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining us. Don't forget you can join us live over jblive.tv, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. Also, jblive.info for the audio edition. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in this week's episode of Coda Radio. See you right back here next week.